Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Study Sesh. I'm Camilla, and today we're getting stuck into spreadsheets. Now, just wait, don't click away just yet. I promise you, being able to properly use things like Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel is going to help you 10x your numbers game. It's going to make your life way easier. These little programs are like the unsung heroes of being organized and of analysis. And if you know how to use them properly, then you can really you can go to the next level. Whether you are crunching numbers for a class project maybe, or managing a budget for your first startup, understanding formulas and functions really can be a game changer. Because it means that you're not just seeing numbers, you're actually seeing your business's story. You can do things like spot trends, maybe understand what's working and what's not working, and how do we fix what's not working. And yes, this skill can and does also translate beyond business. It actually helps, or can help you anyway, in every single data-driven decision you'll ever make. So it really is a tool for life. Today, we're going to look closely at formulas and functions within spreadsheets, and we're going to really understand what they are, how they work, and how they can help us. So let's set the scene a bit before we get going. Now, everyone watching pretty much is a university student, and we all know how tough it can be financially. You've got expenses like textbooks, you've got to pay tuition, and then of course there's the all-important coffee fund, or maybe for you it's a beer fund, right? Now, mastering spreadsheets and formulas and functions can come to the rescue even in your current student life. They can help you keep on top of your finances right now. And it really is a skill that's always going to be useful. So let's get started and let's find out how to make these tools work for us and not against us. And to help us do that, we've got Luciano Saunders. He's really a wizard at making numbers dance on the screen. Luciano, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to chat to you today.
Hi, Camilla. I'm excited to chat to you as well. I wouldn't really say I'm a wizard. I would more say that I'm comfortable with working working with
That's
spreadsheets
a
and
very
making my numbers
data-driven
dance.
analysis. Luciano, I studied journalism. I'm a journalist, and I never thought that
Yeah.
maths and accounting were going to be a thing for me, I'll be honest, let alone spreadsheets. And yet I find that I actually use them a lot. I use them in my work as a journalist to analyze data, but also, for instance, when I'm budgeting for projects or trying to work out how my business is doing. I've even used them to build something like a production schedule for a TV station. They are immensely powerful things. What else can we use them for?
So, like I tell my students, Excel can be very open-ended, right? You can use it to create graphs. You can use it to create presentations. You can even use it to create dashboards as well, where you convey information maybe for an important business meeting or a marketing meeting, or even for a journal meeting, perhaps as well. So that's why I always tell my students that don't limit yourself when you're using it, because the possibilities is so immense as well. So yeah, I think it's very open-ended, Camilla. Very.
Luciano, today we're talking particularly about formulas and functions. Can you explain to us why they are so crucial to understand when we're talking about spreadsheets so that we can properly use spreadsheets?
Okay, so formulas and functions is like the bread and butter of Excel. There's no way that you can go around not using them, because Excel will enforce you to basically use them. So starting with formulas in spreadsheets, right? Like in spreadsheet software, formulas are used to perform calculations on data. You can use mathematical operators such as plus, minus, divide, multiply, along with cell references to create formulas. For example, you use equal A1 plus B1. So that basically adds the values in A1 and B1 to get your answer. And that's why formulas goes in hand with functions as well, because functions are predefined formulas that can perform specific calculations. They often take arguments such as input values and return results. In Excel, for instance, functions are categorized by their purpose. such as mathematical functions. Those are known as your sum functions, your average, your min, your max. Then you have your text functions, which is concatenate, left. You also have your date functions, such as date, today, and now, and so much more as well. To use a function, you can basically just enter its name followed by the argument within parentheses. For example, equals sum A1 till A10. So that calculates the sum of values in cells A1 through A10. So that is just basically a brief explanation of formulas and functions and how they go hand in hand.
So it sounds to me, Luciano, in a way, like formulas are a bit like the stuff you can do on a calculator. Yeah? They are stripped down, they're a little simpler. If you
Yes.
want to add up your monthly expenses, all you do is type the right formula into the cell and bam, you know how much you've spent. You mentioned
Exactly.
a couple of the ones that we can use in terms of formulas that are most useful. Can you just talk us through your, I don't know, top 3 formulas that you use? So before we get to the functions
Okay.
side of things, can you talk to us a little bit about which formulas you think are most useful within a spreadsheet?
Okay, formulas that's most useful in spreadsheets and that could actually make your life completely easier. I would say first one will be the sum function. You can easily take the sum function and calculate your monthly income, your monthly expenses. You can calculate the total of each of your monthly expenses, monthly income, anything. So second one, I would say, this is actually a bit of a tricky question because there's so much, so it's very hard to choose from. Oh, yes, the count function. Especially if you have a very large spreadsheet that you're working with, right? And you have a lot of information, you have a lot of data, you have a lot of names that you're going through. The count function can actually help you a lot. So you can use the count function just to know how much are you working with in terms of names, numbers. So that can save you a lot of time as well. So the last one that I would also say is not much of a function or formula, but I would suggest autofill. So autofill is when you filling in your report, you are doing your Excel task maybe, and you are required to put in information, right, in a table. So you can basically just use autofill to do the work for you, instead of using the function or the formula over and over again in each cell. You can just click in the little corner of the column or the cell, and then you just drag it down and it does the work for you, which makes it very, very much more easier.
Yeah, and it's fun too, right? Watching, as you say, the computer
Yeah.
doing the work for you. I
Yeah.
love that drag function. It really can change your life if you know how to use it properly.
Yeah.
So formulas are simple, right? Think of them a bit like an advanced calculator, but really formulas are just scratching the surface of what spreadsheets can do. Now, functions, I almost think of them like the magic spells of spreadsheets. They can.
Yes,
You've mentioned
yes.
this. They can sum up. They can average out. They can find the highest or the
Yes.
lowest numbers in your data. They make sense of the chaos, so that we can focus on the more important things, like our studies or maybe like what we're doing on the weekend. So functions can really streamline a lot of data processes. And Luciana, can you maybe share some tips maybe, or best practices when working with advanced functions?
Okay, so best tips that I can give, or what I usually give my students, is basically to practice. Because when it comes to Excel and when it comes to spreadsheets and your functions, your advanced functions especially, and that is now working with if functions and VLOOKUP and if VLOOKUP, you get all of these functions, right? So in order to master it, you have to practice. You will need to practice it over and over and over again, because that's the only way that you are basically going to understand the purpose of the function and how to use the function correctly, because that is very, very important. Because sometimes, yes, you can use a function And when you use it incorrectly, you will get values or data that sometimes doesn't make sense or looks a bit very scrambled. So, what I always tell my students is that you will need to practice and keep practicing in order to perfect the function or the formula in such a way that you will be able to do it without hesitating your outcome.
Yeah, I can't agree more with you there that it's about practice, practice, practice. I'm going to ask you that tricky question again. And I know that there are so many amazing functions out there. But Luciano, which are your top three? Which do people need to know and understand? And can you talk us through what they do?
So, first function I would recommend is the sum function. So, the sum function is basically used to get the total value of whatever data you have on your sheet. Say, for instance, you are doing your monthly budget and you want to know your total expenses, you can use the sum function and just sum it up all for you just to get your total expenses. Second function that I would say is the count function. So the count function is being used when you are working with large data, when you want to basically just know the amount of information you have on the spreadsheet. You can use the count function just to make things a little bit more easier. And the count function will basically just tell you, okay, you have this amount of data or this amount of people on the spreadsheet, or you have this amount of expenses, perhaps, or anything in that type of line. A third one that I would say is a date function, which is actually a very, very simple function that not a lot of people actually use. So the date function is used to basically give you today's date, the date that you are in now, and the time as well. Instead of inputting the date on each spreadsheet or on each tab that you open in within the spreadsheet, you can basically just use the date formula to make things a little bit more easier for yourself. So whenever you open a spreadsheet, you can quickly just put in the formula and it will just give you the date, time, however you want to custom it.
Amazing. So let's get to the trickier ones now. You had three more examples for us in your bag. When I first started using spreadsheets and hearing things like VLOOKUP or if, they felt really overwhelming to me. Can you talk us through some of those stickier examples and how we might be able to use them, and why actually, when you start using them, they're not so scary at all?
Yeah, definitely we can talk about that. So first of all, we will start with the if function, right? So the if function are basically used, I will put it in a much more plain term because I know when you get a little bit more technical with it, people tend to shy away from using it. So the if function is basically used to look up value within a spreadsheet, right? But you are looking up for a certain value. For example, you are doing your monthly budget, perhaps, or you're doing your expenses. Maybe let's take monthly budget, right? You're doing your monthly budget and you have your expenses that for different expenses, but now you want to know which of your expenses are only above 500 and which of your expenses are maybe below 200, or which of your expenses have certain keywords, perhaps. So you use the if function basically just to get that tiny information from all of that information, basically. Instead of going to go look for it, you can just use the if function to pull it out for you and just to make things a little bit more easier.
Okay, so the if function is basically a lot like an email filter, if I can put it like that. It gives you specific.
Yeah,
I only want to see
basically.
emails from this person and on this date. I can search
Yeah.
for that and only see that instead of wading through my whole inbox.
Yeah, basically, you can just use it to pull out information that you need.
What about VLOOKUP? Talk to me about VLOOKUP, because this
Okay.
is something that I'm still not sure I entirely understand, but it is unbelievably useful.
Yeah, so basically, VLOOKUP can be very tricky. If you don't, like I said before, if you don't practice, it can become very much a nightmare. And I have been there before. I have tried it many times and it just does not want to work. So the VLOOKUP function is a powerful tool used in spreadsheets, right? To find and retrieve data from a table based on a given lookup value. It searches for a value in the first column of a table range and returns a value in the same row from a specific column. So basically, that is what it does. So it basically just gives you the lookup value, right? The value you want to search in the column of the table. Then you have the table array, the range of cells that contains the table you want to search. And you have your call index num, the column number in the table from which to retrieve the value. And then you have your range lookup as well. So that will be your true or your false. So your true finds the closest match to the lookup value that is less than or equal to the lookup value. And then the false finds an exact match. If there's no match, it returns an error or a specific value. That's why I always say that the VLOOKUP is so intrigued, because there's a lot of components that goes with it. So you will need to understand each and every one of them in order to understand the VLOOKUP.
Right. So let's try and make this concrete for people with an example, Luciano, because, I think spreadsheets can feel overwhelming, right? But if we just put it into context with an example, we can see how powerful they are. So let's imagine we're running a small business. I don't know, let's make it a craft brewery, for instance, okay? And we want to use Google Sheets to manage our finances as part of this craft brewery. How do you use all of these functions together to, say, calculate your monthly profits?
Okay, so obviously I will use the sum function, right, to calculate your total sales or your total profits, right? Let's say you have a column, right? Let's say it's column B, where you record your monthly sales figures. And then to calculate the total sales for the year, you can use a formula, like we said before in Excel, which is the sum formula. Then you will enter equal sum. You take it from B2 to B13. That is assuming that in your Excel sheet that the information lies within those columns. Right. Other thing that we can also do is calculate your total expenses. So similarly, you have a column, let's say column C, where you record your monthly expenses. To calculate the total expenses for the year, you can use another formula in Excel, which will also use basically the sum function as well. But to calculate the profit though, right, you are going to use basically both the information from the total sales and the total expenses. And you will just use a simple function just to get your total, basically your profit. So you take your total sales, you might subtract it from your total expenses, and then you just get your profit, which is a very simple thing that sometimes can just fly over your head if you necessarily don't think about it, right? So yeah, those are a few examples that you can use in Excel when you are doing your yearly profit or your monthly profit.
And I think the important thing for people to remember also is that what we're doing here is putting in the work up front to learn how to properly use something like Google Sheets or Excel. And that's making our lives easier down the line. Because what's the alternative, everyone? It is sitting with a calculator or on your phone or an actual calculator and punching in tons and tons of numbers to try and get to the same figure. And then there's chance for errors to creep in. It's not always accurate, and it's exceptionally time consuming. So putting in the work up front to learn Google Sheets is, to my mind, entirely worth it, because actually it saves you so much more time down the line. Now, Luciano, before we wrap up, any final words of advice for anyone maybe feeling inspired now to get better at using Excel or Google Sheets?
Okay, the one word of advice that I would give anyone or everyone is just to explore a bit, right? Explore with it. You will be amazed at what you find and where the capabilities lies. Yes, it can be a headache sometimes, but if you dig a little bit more deeper, you will find yourself enjoying it maybe.
Absolutely. So everyone, if you're feeling adventurous, why not try your hand at, I don't know, forecasting, doing a bit of forecasting to predict next semester's textbook costs. Or maybe you can explore custom functions to analyze deeper patterns in your spending habits, even before you get into the work world. You know, I think it's also worth it to mention here, and I don't know if you've played around with this, Luciano, but I have found that using ChatGPT to write spreadsheet formulas for me is amazing. Have you played around much with that?
Yeah, definitely. Since AI is so you very much in our lives today, I have actually played around with it, actually just to see what it does and how far it can go as well. But it's a very amazing tool to use, especially when you do not understand it. You can actually use it to just basically learn from it as well. So yeah, I've dabbled around in it. I've seen what I can do, and it's actually very much an amazing tool, especially with Excel spreadsheets.
Absolutely, because of course, spreadsheets aren't AI, they are simply automation. But the combination of spreadsheets and AI can really change the game. So everyone, play around with it. Get ChatGPT or your generative AI program of choice to write some formulas for you and see what it can do. Remember that these formulas and functions aren't just about solving maths problems. They're actually also about solving real life challenges. They empower you, you can take control, you can make informed decisions, and ultimately you can save yourself loads of time and hopefully loads of money. Luciano, thank you so much for joining us. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
I just want to say thank you very much to you, Camilla. You have been amazing through all of this.
Luciano, thanks so much for joining us. And everyone, thanks for tuning in to Study Sesh. Remember, keep exploring those tools, and I promise they'll pay off in more ways than one. Thanks so much and see you soon. Ciao.